The first call comes from a school secretary in Lafitte, and she is trying very hard not to sound scared. I can hear children talking behind her, chairs sliding across tile, a custodian dragging something heavy near a doorway. She says the rain is leaving black streaks on the front steps and on the hoods of every car in the parent pickup line. She says a boy rubbed his wet sleeve across his face and came back from the bathroom with gray smears around his mouth. She says the principal wants to know whether this is smoke from a fire, because the parish office is not answering, and the weather radar still looks ordinary. I ask her to slow down, not because I am calm, because panic makes people skip the part that matters. I ask when the rain started, whether it smelled of fuel, whether the school has a covered walkway, whether anyone is coughing, whether the drains are moving. She says it started at 9:20, just after the morning announcements. The rain looks clear in the air, then turns dark when it lands. The puddles along the curb have black rings around the edges. She says the smell is sharp, but not gasoline, closer to burned wiring and old swamp water. Then she apologizes because she knows that does not help. It helps more than she thinks. I have covered refinery upsets, chemical fires, dead zones in the Gulf, hurricane sludge, saltwater intrusion, boil advisories, wastewater spills, and every useless press statement that says there is no immediate threat before anyone has finished taking samples. A smell description from a frightened school secretary is not proof, but it gives shape to the problem. Burned wiring means metal or ozone to some people. Swamp water means organic rot. Sharp means irritation. Black residue means particulate matter, not just colored water. I write all of that on a yellow pad before I tell my producer to pull every parish alert south of New Orleans. The newsroom is small, rented, and built for voices, not disasters. 2 glass booths, 1 desk with wires under it, a police scanner, a weather feed on a wall screen, an old television muted near the copy machine, and a coffee maker that never shuts off unless someone bumps the plug. We do local public radio work out of that room, because local news is cheaper to ignore than to fund. Most days, I am recording water board meetings, coastal restoration hearings, crop loss interviews, or storm prep segments with people who have said the same responsible thing for 20 years and still cannot get a ditch cleared. That morning, the room feels too clean for what is coming in. The second call is from a cattleman west of Houma. He does not introduce himself. He says his troughs turned black during the shower and 3 calves stopped drinking. Then he says one went down near the fence with foam around its mouth. He is not asking for a reporter. He is asking whether to move the herd or leave the animals under shelter, and that is the first bad sign. People do not call newsrooms for agricultural advice unless every normal line has failed them. I tell him I am not a veterinarian and cannot tell him what to do. I tell him to keep animals away from open water, cover the troughs, take pictures, and call the parish extension office. He says the extension office phone is full. I put him on hold and call the parish emergency manager from my personal phone. No answer. I call a contact at the weather service office near Slidell. She answers on the second ring, which tells me she has not yet been buried. Her voice is clipped. She says radar shows a narrow band moving north from the Gulf across Lafourche, Jefferson, St. Bernard, and Plaquemines. No severe signature, no hail, no unusual lightning. Satellite shows a dirty low cloud deck, but nothing that screams volcanic ash, dust storm, or wildfire smoke. She asks me what I am hearing. I tell her black residue. She goes quiet, then asks whether it is oily. I say I do not know. That is where the story starts for me. Not with bodies. Not with sirens. With a professional meteorologist asking whether rain is oily and not making a joke afterward. By 10 o'clock, pictures are coming in from Grand Isle, Venice, Empire, Belle Chasse, Chalmette, and the east side of New Orleans. Black dots on white pickup trucks. Gray water running off metal roofs. A porch dog with dark staining along its paws. A row of lettuce behind a church garden near Jean Lafitte, leaves speckled and curling at the edges. Drainage canals with dark skin collecting in slow corners. People are angry in the comments before anyone knows what happened. Some say it is a tanker fire in the Gulf. Some say it is from the plants upriver. Some say it is government spraying. Some say it is ash from Mexico, because the internet will drag any disaster across a map if the shape looks useful. So, I hate the certainty people reach for in the first hour. Certainty is comforting. It is also lazy. Industrial smoke can stain rain, but it needs a source, wind, chemistry, and timing. A tanker fire can throw soot, but Coast Guard channels are not reporting one. Wildfire ash can ride a long way, but the air quality monitors are not showing the right pattern yet. Illegal dumping can poison a ditch, but it does not fall across 5 parishes at the same time. That leaves something broad, airborne, and wet. Or it leaves several things happening together, which is usually how disasters get ugly. The first official statement lands at 10:18. It says residents should avoid unnecessary outdoor activity in affected areas due to reports of discolored precipitation. It says public works crews are investigating. It says there is no confirmed threat to drinking water. That wording is careful and weak. No confirmed threat is not the same thing as safe. It means the person typing has no laboratory result, no intake failure, and no permission to say the ugly sentence. I read it twice before going live. I keep my voice plain. I say, we are getting reports of dark residue and rainwater across parts of the Gulf Coast. Do not collect it. Do not let children play in it. Do not use rain barrels until further notice. If you have livestock, pets, or open tanks, keep them out of exposed water. If your tap water changes color, odor, or pressure, report it to your local utility. This is not proof that tap water is unsafe. It is a reason to pay attention. I repeat the last part because the difference matters. Panic can drain stores and block roads. Silence can poison people. My producer Terrence points at the grocery camera feed on the muted television. The local station has a helicopter over a big store in Marrero. People are walking fast out of the entrance with cases of bottled water stacked in carts. A woman is yelling at a man in the parking lot. Nobody is fighting yet. That detail matters too. There is a line between urgency and stampede, and the whole city lives on that line during storms. We have all seen it. A storm track shifts 2 parishes east, and suddenly every shelf gets stripped, because memory is local and fear has receipts. I call my brother at the plant outside Baton Rouge at 10:31. His name is Grant, and he runs night shifts half the month at a surface water treatment facility that pulls from a tributary system tied into the Mississippi River corridor. He answers with machinery noise behind him. I ask whether his intake is showing anything unusual. He says, not on the finished water side, not yet. Raw water turbidity is creeping. The operators are watching the filters and chemical feed. Chlorine demand is a little jumpy, but heavy rain can do that. Then he asks why I am calling instead of texting. I tell him black rain is showing up near the coast. He does not swear. He breathes out through his nose, which is worse. Grant says, if this gets into open reservoirs or canals, they need to test before they guess. Carbon, metals, organics, bacteria, acidity, conductivity, the whole mess. He says people think treatment plants are magic boxes. They are not. They are controlled systems built around expected problems. Mud, algae, bacteria, farm runoff, salt, decaying plant matter, predictable industrial contaminants. You can adjust for a lot when you know the enemy. You can wreck a plant by feeding it a mystery that eats chlorine, clogs filters, coats sensors, or passes through without changing the numbers people watch. I ask what he would do if black residue appeared in raw water at his intake. He says he would notify the state, slow the plant if storage allows, run jar tests, check filters, protect the clear well, and fight anyone who wants reassuring language before the lab gets real data. Then he says not to quote him. I tell him I am quoting the process, not him. He says do that, then hangs up because the control room alarm starts behind him. The rain band reaches New Orleans harder around 11. Not a storm, just steady water, dark drops on concrete, more residue on cars, gutters pushing gray wash into catch basins. A street reporter from another outlet stands under an awning on Canal Street and wipes his sleeve across a sign. His fingers come away black. He laughs because he does not know what else to do. Behind him, tourists duck into hotel lobbies with jackets over their heads, and a bicycle delivery rider keeps going through the intersection with his face angled down. That image bothers me more than the black streaks. Ordinary life keeps moving during the first clear warning because rent is still due, and a person on a bike still needs the next delivery payment. By noon, and schools from Jefferson to St. Bernard are holding students indoors. Some parishes say buses will run late. Some say parents can pick children up if they come to the main entrance. That is bad planning disguised as choice. Thousands of parents leaving work at the same time, driving through contaminated rain, crowding school doors, spreading residue from shoes and sleeves into hallways. A nurse at a middle school in Kenner calls us from a supply closet and says she has 3 children with rashes around their wrists and 1 teacher with gray water in her eyes. She asks whether flushing with tap water is safe. Nobody can answer fast enough. I tell Terrence to find a toxicologist and a public health doctor, not someone who wants to talk politics. The first water advisory comes from a small system near Lower Plaquemines. It is not a boil order. That is important. Boiling helps with living pathogens. It does nothing good for many chemicals and can concentrate some contaminants. The advisory says residents should not drink tap water, use it for cooking, or mix infant formula until further notice. It says bottled water distribution points are being prepared. Prepared is another word that can hide an empty lot, a locked gate, and 1 tired sheriff's deputy with no pallets yet. I go live again and explain what the advisory does and does not mean. I say a do not drink advisory is different from a boil advisory. I say boiling suspicious water can be the wrong move if the concern is chemical contamination. I say if your water provider issues a specific order, follow that language, not a screenshot from somewhere else. I say keep receipts for bottled water if you can, because disasters become paperwork later. Terrence gives me a look from the other side of the glass. He thinks that last line is too practical for the moment. He is wrong. People survive on practical details. Fear burns out. Paperwork keeps a roof over you in the months after. At 12:40, the first refinery contact calls me back. He works on the river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and I have known him long enough to hear when he is choosing each word. He says there was no major unit fire at his facility. No shelter in place. No release matching the footprint. He says several plants are checking flare logs and fence line monitors because everyone knows the public will blame the industrial corridor by lunch. He sounds offended, but also scared. I ask whether rain residue is showing on site. He says yes. Black film on handrails, stair treads, and open gravel. Workers are being moved indoors unless essential. Stormwater gates are being checked. He says their environmental crew found the residue sticking harder to galvanized metal than stainless steel. That detail goes on my pad with a box around it. At 1:10, the newsroom loses half the internet. Not all of it, just enough to remind us that our lines run through the same world we cover. Terrence switches to backup connections and starts saving clips locally. I print contact lists because I have learned the hard way that cloud storage is a promise made by electricity. Our engineer, Parnell, comes in from the hallway with a towel over his shoulders. He was outside for less than a minute moving his truck from a low spot. The towel has gray streaks where rainwater ran from his hair. He says the drops felt gritty on his scalp. His left hand has black residue along an old cut near his thumb. We send him to wash with soap and tap water because there is no advisory for our part of the city yet. He scrubs twice. The black stain fades but does not leave the cut. He says it does not hurt. 15 minutes later, he asks me where the backup batteries are stored. I tell him. 5 minutes after that, he asks Terrence the same question. Terrence looks at me through the glass. Neither of us says the word confusion on air yet. We do not have enough. We have one tired engineer, a stressful day, and a stain on a cut. A good reporter does not turn one man's bad afternoon into a syndrome. Then the hospital calls start. A nurse at University Medical Center says emergency intake is getting exposure complaints, eye irritation, throat burning, skin staining around scratches, bug bites, shaving cuts, and fresh tattoos. One man from Chalmette came in with black lines in the creases of his palms. A sanitation worker from the 9th Ward keeps forgetting which room he is in. A woman from Lower St. Bernard says her husband walked into the rain to clear a storm drain and came back speaking in half sentences. The nurse will not give names. Good. She should not. She says staff are using decontamination showers where they can, but the hospital was not built to process half a parish covered in mystery rain. No hospital is. I ask whether patients are violent. She says no. Irritable, scared, confused, nauseated. Some are shaking. One cleanup worker keeps trying to leave because he thinks his crew is still waiting for him, but the crew never arrived at the hospital. That matters. Not violent. Not monsters. Sick people, scared staff, and missing workers. The slow version is worse because everyone keeps making ordinary decisions during it. Drive here, wash there, clear that drain, check that canal, bring that child in, save that calf. Every reasonable action becomes a possible exposure route. At 1:46, Grant texts me 3 words. Call me now. I step into the hallway and call. He answers on speaker from the control room. He says his raw water sample has dark flecks that settle too slowly. The online turbidity monitor is unstable. Chlorine demand jumped, then dropped, then jumped again. One jar test formed heavy black flock that stuck to the glass. Another did almost nothing with the same chemical dose. He says, "This is not normal organics." I ask whether finished water is safe. He says, "Finished water is still within routine numbers at the moment." Then he says, "Routine numbers may not be enough if the thing is not routine." I hate him for saying it because I know he is right. He tells me operators are checking open basins for surface film. They are calling the state. The supervisor wants to keep distribution pressure stable because losing pressure can pull dirty water through cracks and backflow points. That is another bad trade-off. Slow the plant too much and tanks fall. Keep pushing water and you may push uncertainty into homes. Every disaster has a machine room full of choices the public never hears about until somebody gets blamed. I ask whether he has protective gear. He says gloves, goggles, Tyvek suits, respirators, not enough for every possible task if this drags. He says they are setting up a wash station by the operations building and keeping people out of rain. Then his voice changes. He says one of his guys opened a sampling hatch during a gust and got rainwater down his sleeve. The man keeps saying he tastes pennies. Grant says the man is angry because they pulled him from the floor. I tell Grant to document every exposure with times. He says he already started. He is a plant operator, not a journalist, but good operators understand records better than most reporters. At 2 o'clock, the state holds a remote briefing. The video stutters. A health official says samples are being collected. An environmental official says no single industrial source has been identified. A transportation official says roads are open, but drivers should avoid standing water. A parish president from the coast says crews are checking drainage pumps. A reporter asks whether the rain is toxic. The health official says there is no definitive laboratory confirmation of acute toxicity in drinking water systems at this time. That sentence is a locked door with a window in it. You can see fear moving behind the glass. I write the sentence down exactly, then translate it on air. I say, officials do not yet have enough lab proof to define the hazard. That does not mean the rain is safe. Treat black residue as a potential contaminant. Keep it off skin. Keep it out of food, animal water, and open containers. Do not drive through flooded industrial areas unless ordered by emergency personnel. I say it twice. I know some listeners will call that alarmist. Fine. Alarmism is when you invent certainty. This is the opposite. This is telling people what we do not know before ignorance gets dressed up as comfort. Around 2:30, the first canal video comes from Terrebonne Parish. A ditch beside a 2-lane road is full of dark floating mats. Not oil. Oil moves with a slick shine. This looks granular and broken, with tiny clumps collecting around reeds and trash. A man filming says the minnows are at the top. You can see them flashing pale under the surface. He says the frogs stopped. I do not know whether frogs stop all at once. I know people say strange things when a familiar place changes. Then a fish rolls sideways near the culvert and stays there, gills opening and closing. The man filming stops talking. A coastal scientist I trust calls from Lafayette. She has been watching the images and checking rain collectors from a university field site. She says preliminary microscopy from one sample shows irregular dark particles, not uniform soot. Some particles cling to organic matter. Some react near rusted metal shavings. Some seem to break apart in treated water, but not cleanly. She keeps saying preliminary. I appreciate that. It means she still respects reality. I ask whether it could be biological. She says maybe partly, but the particles do not match a simple algal bloom or ordinary fungal spores. I ask whether it is a chemical. She says that word is too small. That is the moment the first theory dies. Industrial ash would be terrible but understandable. A plume, a source, a hazard model, a downwind zone, a cleanup method. This thing is stranger because it is not behaving in one fixed way. It changes with water, metal, soil, and skin. It clots in some places and vanishes in others. It stains living tissue through breaks, but mostly washes off unbroken skin. It kills fish in canals, yet some treated water numbers stay normal. It sticks to galvanized metal harder than stainless steel. It makes chlorine demand jump and fall. That is not a villain. That is a system failure in the shape of rain. Erels. The newsroom starts getting callers who want us to say the government did it. I do not indulge them. I have covered enough real negligence to know conspiracy thinking can make a lazy person feel informed without doing work. Companies hide releases. Agencies delay warnings. Officials protect their careers. All of that can be true without inventing a secret weather machine. The facts are already bad. They do not need decoration. At 3:12, a woman from St. Bernard says her husband is on a public works crew that went into a flooded pump station near an industrial drainage corridor. He called once and said the water inside was black around the grates. Then his phone cut off. She has called the parish, the sheriff, his supervisor, and every hospital she can think of. Nobody will tell her where the crew is. She is not crying. She is doing that flat voice people get when every useful emotion has been spent. I take her number. I tell her we will check. Off air, Terrence says, we cannot become a missing person's desk. I say, today we might be exactly that. We reach a dispatcher who confirms a public works crew missed a check-in but will not give names. Search and rescue is delayed because the station area may be contaminated and rainfall is intensifying. Delayed. Another word that can mean anything from 5 minutes to a body nobody can reach. I do not say that on air. I say a crew has missed a scheduled check-in near a flooded facility, and officials are assessing how to enter safely. It sounds bloodless. It is also the only version I can prove. Parnell gets worse around 3:30. He is sitting at the engineering desk with his wet shoes off, socks in a trash bag, one hand wrapped in gauze. He keeps checking the same cable run behind the rack. He says he needs to stop the hum. There is no hum. I ask him what he had for breakfast. He says he already told me. He has not. He gets mad when I ask the date. Then he says the rain has a tone in it. Terrence and I exchange a look. There are sounds in rain on a roof, in drains, in tires, in air conditioning units. People can hear patterns when stressed. Still, I write the sentence down. Rain has a tone in it. A doctor comes on with us at 3:40. She specializes in occupational exposure and disaster medicine. She speaks carefully and refuses to speculate beyond the cases she has seen. She says contamination around broken skin is concerning because barriers matter. She says confusion after exposure can come from many sources: dehydration, panic, inhalation, toxic exposure, infection, low oxygen, chemical irritation, medication interactions. She says anyone with heavy exposure, eye involvement, breathing trouble, confusion, or staining around wounds should seek medical care. But people should call first if possible to avoid crowding entrances. She reminds listeners not to mix cleaning chemicals. That sounds small until you remember half the coast owns bleach and ammonia and fear. Chiu. The caller lines choke after that. People want permission to wash roofs, drain pools, hose cars, bleach patios, flush cisterns, dump troughs, open culverts, close culverts, keep chickens inside, let horses out, send workers home, keep workers in. There is no single answer. Louisiana is a place where water touches everything. Rain does not stay in the sky story. It becomes ditch water, drinking water, crop water, cooling water, bayou water, flood water, mud, vapor, mold, rust, insurance claim, school closure, church pantry problem, and dinner table argument before sunset. At 4:15, the Louisiana Department of Health expands advisories for several small water systems and asks residents using private wells in affected rain zones to avoid drinking untreated well water until testing guidance is released. That line lands hard in rural areas. Private wells are freedom until something gets into the ground. Then every household becomes its own utility, with no lab, no treatment operator, and no spare parts. I tell people not to pour bleach into wells based on internet advice. Disinfection is a procedure, not a panic ritual. I can hear my own voice getting sharper. I dial it back. Scared people do not need scolding. They need instructions. The first death confirmed to us is not human. It is a herd loss near Raceland. 6 cattle down, more sick, troughs contaminated, pasture low spots holding black water. A veterinarian says samples are being collected and tells farmers not to move carcasses without guidance. That sounds slow and bureaucratic, but it matters. Dragging contaminated animals through mud, onto trailers, across parish lines, into rendering systems, or near other herds can spread whatever is there. The farmer who called in the morning texts us one sentence, "Lost 2 more." I stare at it longer than I should. Human injury comes in pieces. A cleanup worker with chemical burns. A teenage boy with black staining and scraped knees after playing basketball in a flooded driveway. An elderly woman who drank from a rain barrel because her house pressure dropped and nobody reached her. A tow truck driver who pulled 3 cars from a flooded underpass and now cannot remember his own phone passcode. None of it is cinematic. It is worse than cinematic because it is paperwork, triage, wet clothing, traffic, call holds, families driving in circles, nurses improvising intake categories, and pharmacists trying to explain that clean water is part of medicine. By 5, the first national outlets are using the phrase black rain. I hate that too, even though it is accurate enough. Once a disaster gets a clean name, it turns into a content product. Panels, arguments, old footage, wrong maps. People in other states asking whether it is safe to vacation in Florida. People in Louisiana asking whether anyone with power is paying attention. Our newsroom stays local. Roads, water systems, schools, hospitals, pumps, shelters. I tell Terrence to reject every caller who only wants to rant. We do not have airtime for anger with no location attached. Grant calls again at 5:17. His plant is still running, but they have isolated one basin and reduced flow. State people are on the line. Samples are going out by vehicle because nobody wants to rely on a courier system already snarled by weather. He says one operator went home sick. The man with rain down his sleeve is at urgent care with confusion and staining near his wrist. Grant sounds older than he did that morning. I ask whether he is exposed. He says everyone is exposed to something by now. Then he catches himself and says he has not had direct contact beyond the control building entry. I tell him to stay inside. He laughs once, not amused, just short. He says the raw water particles behave differently in glass jars from different intake points. In one, black material gathers around rusty sediment. In another, it stays suspended. In a third, it forms a skin near the surface after aeration. He says if he did not know better, he would think the particles were selecting surfaces. Then he says he does know better and selection is the wrong word. Charge, chemistry, surface energy, organic coatings, mineral content, acidity, temperature. He is arguing with his own fear, using training to keep it cornered. That is when I realize I am doing the same thing on air. At 6 o'clock, rain stops over the city for 26 minutes. People come outside too fast. They step onto porches, wipe windshields, drag trash cans, check mail, film puddles, walk dogs, smoke, argue, and sweep water away from doors. The residue dries from shiny gray to dull black on concrete. When cars roll through it, the tires leave tracks that look normal for a second, and then darken at the edges. A man across from the station uses a leaf blower on his sidewalk. Terrence opens the side door and yells at him to stop. The man yells back that he is not letting that mess stain his brick. He keeps blowing until the dust lifts under the awning and the first people nearby start coughing. We report it immediately. Do not dry sweep. Do not use leaf blowers. Do not pressure wash into drains. Do not send contaminated runoff into yards, storm sewers, or animal areas. Avoid creating dust from dried residue. Bag exposed clothing if you can do so without shaking it. Wash skin with soap and clean water unless local water guidance says otherwise. We repeat those lines every 10 minutes. The advice sounds boring. Boring advice saves more people than heroic advice. At 6:20, the city announces distribution of bottled water at several points, then pulls 2 locations 20 minutes later because the lots are flooded. People are furious. I understand them. A location list is a promise. Breaking it feels personal when your child is thirsty and your tap smells strange. But flooded lots are not safe, and moving pallets requires trucks, drivers, police, lighting, forklifts, and a route that is not blocked by crashes. This is the part outsiders never grasp. Supplies do not arrive because someone says supplies on television. Every case of water needs a chain of ordinary workers who are also scared for their own families. The second storm band forms offshore near sunset. The Weather Service calls it training rain, bands moving over the same areas, with heavier cells from the Gulf pushing inland. Under normal conditions, that means street flooding, pump strain, ditch backup, and miserable commutes. Under black rain conditions, it means everything bad gets mobile. Residue that sat on roofs moves into gutters. Yard contamination moves into ditches. Ditches move into canals. Canals push toward pumping stations and lakes. Farm runoff crosses roads. Industrial yards lose containment where gates and berms were built for normal stormwater, not mystery particulate that reacts with metal and living tissue. A parish official from Plaque Mines comes on near 6:40. He is exhausted and angry in a controlled way. He says emergency crews are not refusing to help people. They are staging until they can enter contaminated water with protective equipment. He says residents in low-lying areas should move to higher ground before the next band if they can do so safely, but he stops short of saying evacuate. I ask him whether people should leave now. He says, I cannot issue that order from this chair. I ask whether he would keep his own family in a house surrounded by black standing water during the next band. He pauses too long. Then he says, no. Terrence points at me hard through the glass because that answer is going to travel. I do not apologize for asking. Public officials often cannot say the useful sentence until someone asks it in human language. At 7, we get a field report from a freelance photographer near the industrial canal. He is under an overpass using a plastic bag over his camera. Water is rising along the curb. He says the runoff is blacker near the fence line of a storage yard and lighter near the open street. He sees 2 cleanup trucks parked with doors open and no crew in view. He is not going in. I tell him on air to stay out of the water. He says he knows. Then he says a dog is standing on top of a flooded sedan, barking at something under the bridge. We hear the dog through his phone. Then we hear a splash. The photographer curses, and the line cuts. For 12 seconds, nobody in the newsroom moves. Then Terrence calls him back. No answer. Calls again. No answer. We do not report him missing right away because dropped calls happen under bridges during storms. Parnell starts laughing quietly from the engineering desk. He says the rain took the dog. I tell him to stop. He looks at me with no recognition for half a second, or then asks why his hand is wrapped. We call medical transport for him. They tell us response is delayed unless he has trouble breathing, chest pain, seizure, or severe altered mental status. Severe altered mental status. I ask the dispatcher what counts as severe. She says if he becomes a danger to himself or others, call back. She is not being cruel. She is triaging a city that has filled every available unit. We move Parnell into the smaller booth, give him water from sealed bottles, take his belt and pocket knife without making a big thing of it, and keep him talking. He tells us twice that he needs to check the transmitter. We are not using one here. He knows that on any other day. At 7:31, the first federal statement comes. Federal agencies are supporting state and local partners. Samples are undergoing analysis. Residents should follow local guidance. Avoid contact with discolored rainwater and contaminated floodwater. No cause has been confirmed. That is all true. It is also behind the day by about 6 hours. We are no longer asking whether the rain is dangerous. We are asking how dangerous, where, for how long, through which route, and what systems are already compromised. The newsroom debate starts at 7:40. It is not loud at first. Terrence wants us to repeat official evacuation language, not go beyond it. He says if we tell people to leave without a formal order and they get trapped on flooded roads, that is on us. I say if we wait until formal language catches up, people south and east of the city may be under the second band with contaminated water at their doors. He says we are journalists, not emergency managers. I say we are also the only live local voice some people can still hear. He says that does not give us authority. I say no, it gives us responsibility to tell the truth with limits. That is the hardest line in the whole job. Authority and responsibility are not the same. A reporter cannot order an evacuation. A reporter can say every fact points toward leaving low areas before travel becomes unsafe. A reporter can say officials have not used the word mandatory. A reporter can say the absence of a mandatory order does not mean staying is safe. A reporter can say, if you are in a place where black floodwater is entering your home and you have a safe route to higher ground, you should move now. That is not command. That is reality with a name on it. At 8, we broadcast the warning. I speak slowly because I know clips will get cut apart. I say, this is not a mandatory evacuation order. We do not have the legal authority to issue one. But based on confirmed water advisories, hospital reports, contaminated runoff, missing crews, livestock deaths, and the second storm band moving inland, people in low-lying areas with black standing water should prepare to move to higher ground before conditions worsen. Do not drive through floodwater. Do not walk through black water. If your route is already flooded, shelter upstairs or in the highest safe interior room and call local emergency numbers. If you depend on medical equipment, oxygen, dialysis, refrigerated medicine, or mobility support, call for help before the next band arrives. Do not wait for your house to flood. Terrence watches me through the glass with his arms crossed. He is mad. He also does not stop the feed. The phones explode. Some people thank us. Some call us irresponsible. A council member's aide demands to know who approved our language. A pastor in Lower Jefferson says he is opening the church hall on higher ground, but only for people who can arrive dry, because they cannot decontaminate the whole building. A school bus driver says he has a bus and no orders. An elderly man in Empire says his daughter wants him to leave, but he will not abandon his shrimp boat. A woman in Arabi says water is coming through her garage and the bottom of it is black. I ask whether she can get upstairs. She says yes. I tell her not to step into the garage water. She says her cat is in there. That is when radio stops being information and becomes a witness to decisions nobody should have to make. At 8:22, Grant calls again. I can barely hear him over alarms. He says his plant has issued a precautionary shutdown for one treatment train. Distribution pressure is being supported from storage. He says regional coordination is breaking because every system wants lab priority. Bigger utilities get attention first because they serve more people. Smaller systems scream because their margin is thinner. He says they found black residue inside an air vent louver on a building that was supposed to be closed. One operator is missing for 7 minutes during a basin check, then found standing by a fence in the rain, with no memory of going outside. Grant's voice cracks for the first time when he says the man was his friend. I ask where Grant is. Control room, doors taped, wet gear isolated. He says he can stay through the night if needed. I tell him not to be brave for machines. He says if the machines fail, people drink whatever comes out of their taps or whatever is in the ditch. He is right. There are jobs where leaving is also a decision with a body count. The second band reaches us at 8:40. Rain hits the roof with more weight than before. The sound fills the ceiling and the vents. Parnell starts whispering from the booth. He says it is not rain. He says it is counting. Terrence tells him to shut up, then immediately apologizes. I look at the window. The glass is streaked black from the outside. Water runs down in crooked paths where the residue clings, then releases, then clings again. Across the street, the leaf blower man is gone. His blower sits on the sidewalk, half under the awning, getting wet. Power flickers at 8:53. The backup supply catches the studio, but the hallway lights die for 3 seconds before the building generator starts. 3 seconds is long enough for every person in a room to hear every hidden dependency. Ventilation, routers, pumps below street level, elevators, refrigerators, chargers, traffic lights, hospital monitors, plant control panels. The grid is not a background detail during water disasters. It is a skeleton people only notice when pieces stop moving. So, at 9, a deputy from Lafitte calls from a personal phone. He will not give his name on air. He says he has been moving door to door where water is rising and people are refusing to leave because no mandatory order came. He heard our warning through a portable radio in a resident's kitchen. He says, "Keep saying it." Then he says one of the roadside ditches has dead birds in it. Not one or two. A line of them near a culvert. I ask whether he can photograph safely. He says no. Good answer. Documentation is not worth adding another exposure. Hospital capacity becomes the main story by 9:15. Emergency rooms are not collapsing from violence. They are clogging with uncertainty. People with mild exposure want reassurance. People with serious exposure wait behind them. Staff have to decide who gets decontamination first, who gets oxygen, who gets a bed, who can be sent home with instructions nobody trusts. Ambulances line up because crews cannot unload fast enough. Some crews have contamination concerns inside rigs. Cleaning a rig after unknown exposure takes time, space, and supplies. Every minute spent cleaning is a minute not responding. That is how a rain event becomes a medical system event without a single explosion. The toxicologist comes back on around 9:30. He has seen preliminary reports from colleagues but will not cite details he cannot verify. He says the phrase, "not one substance," may be correct. He says environmental mixtures can change by contact with surfaces, sunlight, microbes, salts, metals, and treatment chemicals. He says some particles can carry other compounds on their surfaces. He says living tissue is not just wet material. It has oils, proteins, damaged cells, immune response, salts, and heat. That may explain why old cuts stain more than intact skin. He does not say mutation. He does not say alien. He does not say anything useful for headlines. He says avoid exposure and preserve samples in clean glass if officials request them. That is useful. A caller from Morgan City says the rain in his yard has turned the water in a plastic kiddie pool black, but the same rain in a stainless cooking pot stayed pale gray. Another caller from Chalmette says her aluminum porch rail has white pitting under the black film. A mechanic in Westwego says every spot where the rain touched brake dust turned darker. A woman outside Gonzales says her garden soil foamed in small patches when the rain hit, but the concrete walkway did not. None of these people are scientists. Together, they are a field network. I tell listeners to report observations without touching residue. Pictures, locations, time, surface type, smell, symptoms, water source. And no theories unless they have data. I know that sounds harsh. It keeps the record clean. At 9:50, our missing photographer calls from an unknown number. His voice is low and slow. He says he is in a warehouse office near the canal. He lost his phone in water. The dog is gone. He saw 2 cleanup workers inside the fenced yard, but they were not walking right. I ask what that means. He says confused, stumbling, one crawling with his face close to the water. Not attacking, not chasing, moving without understanding where he was. The photographer says he tried to call out. Then his throat burned, and he ran. He does not know which building he entered. He can hear rain hitting metal overhead. I tell him to stay out of floodwater, block the door if he can, and give us anything visible through a window. He says there are drums with shipping labels, but he cannot read them from the office. Then he asks why he is holding a stapler. The line goes quiet. Terrence whispers, "Do we air that? We already are. I forgot to take him off live. That mistake may save him or ruin us." Within 3 minutes, listeners near the canal are calling with possible locations. One recognizes a mural on a wall the photographer described. Another knows a storage yard with a small office and a chain-link fence near the overpass. We pass the information to emergency services. A dispatcher says contaminated access is still a problem. I say on air that location tips are being sent to authorities and nobody should attempt a rescue alone. 2 men call anyway and say they are going. I tell them not to. One says, "Somebody has to." That is the sentence that gets people killed in every flood. By 10:15, the city issues a shelter guidance update with evacuation language for specific low areas, not the whole parish. It is too late for some roads and useful for others. That is how real warnings often work. Ugly, partial, late, still necessary. We read every zone twice. We explain that parish lines are less important than water at your door and safe routes. We remind people to bring medicine, identification, phone chargers, sealed water, baby supplies, pet carriers, and dry clothing if they can. We say do not bring contaminated items into shelters unless staff instructs you. We say if you are wet with black rain, tell shelter staff before entering. Not to shame anyone, to keep others safe. At 10:30, Parnell tries to leave the booth. He says his mother is outside. His mother died 4 years ago. Terrence and I guide him back into the chair without grabbing his stained hand. He is sweating. His pupils look normal, which means nothing. He asks if we are recording. I say yes. He says, "Good," because I keep losing the middle of things. Then he looks at me and knows me for a full clear minute. He says, "Do not let me near the rack." I say, "I won't." He nods and closes his eyes. That is the first time all day I feel fear in a personal way. Not for the story. For the man breathing 10 feet from me with rain inside his body and no hospital ready to take him. The black rain crosses Lake Pontchartrain toward the North Shore after 10:40. Slidell, Mandeville, Covington, and smaller communities start sending pictures. This matters because a lot of people fled north during earlier storms. North does not mean safe when the sky is the delivery system. Interstate 12 slows from crashes and people pulling under overpasses. The Causeway reports reduced visibility and asks drivers not to stop on the bridge unless disabled. A truck jackknifes near an exit. A woman calls from a car with 2 children asleep in the back and says she cannot tell whether to keep driving or turn around. I ask where she is. She says between exits, traffic stopped, rain hitting hard. I tell her not to turn around in traffic, keep vents on recirculate if she smells irritation, avoid standing outside, and listen for state police updates. It feels inadequate because it is. Sometimes safety is just the least stupid choice left. At 11, a lab contact from a university sends me a message I read 3 times before using any of it. The sample contains carbon-rich particles, trace metals, complex organic material, and structures that do not match common urban soot alone. Some particles appear to absorb chlorine compounds. Some appear to bind with iron and zinc. Under magnification, several particles change shape after contact with untreated canal water, but not after contact with sterile distilled water in the same way. The contact writes, "Do not call it alive." Then writes, "Do not call it dead either." I do not put that last line on air. It is too easy to abuse. What I say is this. Early laboratory review suggests the black rain contains a complex mixture, and experts have not identified a single source or single chemical. The material may interact differently with metals, soils, untreated water, and damaged skin. That supports the safety advice already being given. Avoid contact. Protect water. Do not assume clear tap water is safe if your local system has issued an advisory. Do not assume black residue is harmless because it dries. We will update when agencies confirm more. Terrence says that was clean. Coming from him under that much stress, it matters. At 11:20, Grant stops answering. I call once. No answer. Twice. No answer. I text. No reply. I keep working because that is what the job requires, and because stopping would not help him. I read a list of water distribution points. I correct a rumor about a levee breach that did not happen. I interview a parish official about shelter capacity. I tell people again not to walk through floodwater. I read a hospital update. My phone sits on the desk with his name on the screen from the last call, and every few seconds I look at it. Personal drama is useless to the audience until it touches the facts, but facts are carried by people. My brother is one of them. At 11:41, he texts one word. Inside. Then another. Safe. Then a third message. Longer. Lost phones in wet room. Control building sealed. One exposure severe. State taking over comms. Keep telling people pressure loss matters. I read that line and put it into the broadcast without naming him. Pressure loss matters. If your water system reports low or lost pressure, follow advisories. Low pressure can allow contamination to enter damaged lines, especially in flooded areas. Do not use water from outdoor taps that have been submerged. Do not connect hoses across contaminated ground. Do not draw from pools, ditches, canals, or rain barrels for drinking. If you have sealed bottled water, ration it calmly. Do not hide information from neighbors who may not have heard alerts. That last part is not official, but it is right. Midnight arrives without feeling new. The room smells of coffee, wet fabric, electronics, and the faint chemical odor clinging to Parnell's bagged clothes. The rain keeps falling. The black streaks on the window have thickened, and the outside world is reduced to headlights, water, and shapes moving under streetlights. We are still on air. We are tired enough to make mistakes, so Terrence and I start reading everything back to each other before saying it. Locations, advisories, names of parishes, phone numbers, shelter addresses. We slow down. Disaster speed kills accuracy. A call comes from an emergency room physician in Baton Rouge at 12:16. He says his hospital is seeing cases from farther south and from plant workers along the river. Confusion is the symptom everyone wants to talk about, but he is more concerned about delayed respiratory irritation and skin breakdown around exposed wounds. He says several patients with old cuts developed black staining that did not scrub off, then swelling around the tissue. He says one patient with heavy exposure to floodwater deteriorated after arriving alert. I ask whether this is contagious person to person. He says there is no evidence of that right now. I ask whether exposed clothing is a hazard. He says treat it as contaminated until authorities give guidance. That distinction matters enough to repeat. No evidence of person-to-person spread. Treat contaminated clothing and water as hazards. Sick people need care, not exile. Fear of infection can become cruelty fast. During outbreaks, storms, and chemical events, people with symptoms get turned into threats by neighbors who were sharing dinner with them yesterday. I refuse to feed that unless facts force it. At 12:40, the photographer is found alive by a hazardous materials team and taken for treatment. We report only that he is alive. The dog is not mentioned because we do not know. The cleanup workers from the yard are found too. One is dead, one is alive but severely confused. A third worker from a different crew is still missing. Authorities do not confirm whether contaminated water caused their condition. They do not need to. The pattern is already visible. The second human death we hear about, though not officially tied, is the elderly woman who drank from the rain barrel. Her neighbor calls us after the ambulance leaves. He says she had lived through Betsy, Camille, Katrina, Ida, and more boil advisories than he could count. She did what had worked before: catch water, strain it, boil it. A lifetime of storm knowledge turned dangerous because the hazard changed. That one sits with me. Good habits can betray you when the world changes faster than the lesson. At 1:15 in the morning, the rain lightens again. Emergency calls do not. The stormwater system is carrying the day into every low place. Pump stations are running. Some are being shut for inspection. Industrial facilities are reporting contaminated runoff storage nearing capacity. Farms are isolating animals. Hospitals are routing ambulances. Shelters are arguing about decontamination space. Schools are trying to reunite children with parents without sending staff outside. Water systems are waiting on lab data that will be too late for people currently thirsty. That is the truth of the night. The science is behind the exposure. The paperwork is behind the science. The rain does not wait for either. Terrence asks me whether we should end the live stream and switch to recorded updates so we can rest. He asks because he is responsible, not lazy. A tired host can cause harm. A live voice can also keep people from doing stupid things in the dark. We compromise. He takes the chair for 10 minutes each half hour while I verify updates. I take the chair while he calls shelters and hospitals. We sound rough. We sound human. That is enough. Parnell sleeps in the booth, then wakes confused, then clear, then confused again. The staining on his hand has spread slightly under the gauze. We draw a line around it with a marker and write the time. That is something first aid people do with swelling and redness, but it feels strange on black staining from rain. He watches me write the time and says, "You better spell my name right in the lawsuit." I laugh because he is clear enough for jokes. Then he asks whether his mother called. Terrence turns away. At 2 o'clock, the governor's office requests carriage of an emergency message. We play it in full. It tells residents in designated areas to avoid all contact with black rain residue and floodwater, to follow parish movement guidance, to use bottled water where advisories are active, to report missing persons through official numbers, and to keep roads clear for emergency traffic. The message says federal teams are deploying additional hazardous materials, public health, and water system support. It does not say what the material is. It does not say where it came from. It does not say when the rain will stop. People hate messages with gaps. Honest gaps are better than false closure. A caller from Thibodaux says his neighbor shot at a drainage ditch because he saw movement in the water. Nobody was hurt. I tell listeners not to fire weapons into floodwater, ditches, culverts, or dark shapes. Bullets can travel unpredictably through water, ricochet from hidden metal or concrete, and injure people working nearby. Also, shooting water does not solve contamination. I cannot believe I have to say it, but I say it twice. In every disaster, someone adds a firearm to a plumbing problem. At 2:25, the coastal scientist calls back. Her team compared samples from open rain collectors, street runoff, canal water, and a cattle trough. The rain collector sample is the cleanest version, which is a terrible phrase. Runoff samples are more reactive. Canal samples show oxygen collapse and biological stress. Trough samples show heavy particle concentration around feed residue and metal edges. She says the material seems to become more hazardous after contact with organic waste, corroded metal, and stagnant water. And that means the rain itself is only the start. The landscape is part of the reaction. I ask whether sunlight will break it down. She says unknown. I ask whether filtration works. She says depends on filter type, particle size, and what is dissolved versus attached. I ask whether household filters will protect people. She says people should not trust pitcher filters or refrigerator filters for this. I put that on air immediately. Those filters are for taste and some routine contaminants, not mystery rain chemistry. If your water system says do not drink, a kitchen filter does not overrule that. The third storm band misses the city, but hits west of us. Lake Charles starts reporting black residue before 3. That widens the event beyond the first footprint and kills the last comfortable idea that this is one local plume. The Gulf Coast is being painted in sections. People in Texas start calling because they want to know whether it is coming. I am careful. I say the current reports are from Louisiana and parts of the Gulf Coast, and weather movement will determine risk. I say follow local officials. I do not say everyone is safe elsewhere. I do not say everyone is doomed. The middle is where truth usually lives, and people hate it there. At 3:10, Grant finally calls. He says they kept pressure. He says one section of the plant is offline. He says the exposed operator is being transported. He says state officials are pushing a regional do not drink advisory for connected low-pressure zones. Then he says, I need you to say something for the operators. I ask what? He says, tell people not to open hydrants. Tell them not to flush lines themselves. Tell them not to drain towers by panic. Tell them every stupid thing they do to the system makes our job harder. I tell him I cannot call listeners stupid. He says, fine, call it dangerous. So I do. Do not open hydrants. Do not tamper with valves. Do not try to flush neighborhood lines. Do not connect pumps to public water lines. Do not assume more flow means safer water. Water systems need pressure, direction, storage, sampling, and controlled treatment. Panic actions can pull contaminants into places they were not before. I repeat that until I am tired of my own voice. At 3:40, we get word that one parish has requested voluntary evacuation for neighborhoods near contaminated drainage and industrial floodwater. Voluntary is another hard word. It means leave if you can, but nobody is coming street by street to force you. It also means people without cars, money, health, fuel, or trust get left to interpret choice as failure. I read the parish bus pickup points and accessible transport number 3 times. I tell people to check on neighbors who may not hear alerts. I say check from the doorway if you are dry. Do not walk through black water to be helpful unless someone is in immediate danger. Help can create a second victim. About near 4, the rain stops over New Orleans. Real quiet follows. Not peace. Work. Pumps still running. Tires pushing through water. Helicopters far off. Ambulances moving. Our phones blinking. The black residue outside starts drying on the glass again. I can see handprints on the station door from somebody who tried to enter earlier. We never heard the knock. The prints are dark at the fingertips and smeared down the metal handle. I do not know who it was. That detail stays with me because it is small and unanswered. Disasters are full of people who almost reached you. By 4:15, official language catches up to where our broadcast had been hours earlier. Avoid travel in affected low areas. Move to higher ground where safe routes exist. Treat black rain residue and contaminated runoff as hazardous. Follow water advisories. Report symptoms after exposure. Keep children and animals away from standing water. The same advice sounds different with a seal attached. People who called us reckless at 8 now share the government post at 4 without apology. I am too tired to care. We begin taking fewer live calls and more verified reports. That is another shift. The first hours need raw witness accounts because agencies are blind. Later, raw accounts can drown you in repetition and rumor. We build a running map on paper because the digital one keeps freezing. Parishes with rain, water advisories, road closures, hospital strain, missing crews, animal deaths, confirmed shelters, suspected industrial runoff zones. Every dot has a time. Time matters. A place may be safe at noon and unsafe at midnight. A plant may be fine until pressure drops. A road may be clear until the next band. WUD. At 5, dawn is still far enough away to feel fake, but the eastern sky starts changing behind the cloud deck. I have been on disasters through the night before. Hurricanes, chemical fires, freezes, floods. Dawn usually gives shape to damage. This time, I dread it. Daylight will show every stained roof, every dead ditch, every flooded yard, every cow down in a pasture, every black handprint on a door, every car abandoned in water, every parent who drove too late, every worker who did not come back from a pump station. Night hides scale. Morning bills you for it. Parnell's ambulance arrives at 5:18. 2 responders come in wearing protective suits that look too thin for what we have imagined, and probably adequate for what they can carry. They assess him, bag his clothes, ask exposure questions, and take pictures of the staining with a ruler beside his hand. Parnell is clear when they load him. He tells Terrence to stop touching the compressor settings. Terrence says he will ruin them in his honor. Parnell smiles. Then he looks at me and says, "If I forget this, play me the tape." I promise him I will. I go back on air right after the door closes. My voice nearly breaks. So I drink warm bottled water and read the latest advisory instead. That is not bravery. It is a trick. Tasks can hold you together when emotion would waste the minute. The audience does not need my grief. It needs the address of the open clinic in Jefferson Parish and the warning that the first location filled up. Theo. At 5:40, a federal scientist joins by phone. He will not discuss origin. He will not discuss terrorism, natural sources, industrial sources, or biological classification. He says the working field assumption is hazardous environmental contamination with complex particulate behavior. He says teams are prioritizing exposure reduction, water system protection, and sample integrity. I ask whether the rain can become more dangerous after landing. He says environmental interaction may alter hazard profiles. That is government language for yes, maybe. I translate carefully. The material may change after it contacts soil, metal, stagnant water, waste, or damaged tissue. That means cleanup guidance matters. Do not improvise. He thanks me for saying do not improvise. That is when I know the cleanup situation is worse than they have admitted. At 6, we air a field report from the West Bank. A community center has become a shelter and water point. Volunteers set up separate entry paths for dry people and exposed people because somebody listened. Plastic sheeting on the floor, hand washing stations, a table for medications, a corner for pets and carriers. It is not enough, but it is functioning. A woman there says people are arriving with trash bags over shoes, motorcycle helmets, shower caps, ski goggles, rain ponchos, and one man wearing a plastic storage bin lid tied over his shoulders. Disaster gear is often ridiculous before it is useful. I do not mock any of it. Dry skin and clean shoes matter more than looking normal. The first fights at water points come after 6:30, not riots. Fights. 2 men over a cart. A woman screaming because a volunteer will not let her take 6 cases. A driver trying to cut the line with a truck. Police step in. Nobody is seriously hurt. We report it without making it sound larger than it is. People under resource stress can act ugly. Most people in line still wait. Most volunteers still work. Most drivers still move when told. You have to say that too, or the public starts believing collapse is permission. Grant sends a picture at 6:45. I do not show it on air. It is a basin wall at his plant, with black material gathered along the water line. The stain is uneven, thicker near rusted bolts. He writes, looks worse in person. Then, do not say my plant. I do not. The public needs the system warning, not a crowd outside his gate. Around 7, official advice shifts from rain exposure to residue management. Do not sweep dry residue. Do not rinse large amounts into storm drains. Keep children away from contaminated outdoor surfaces. Bag small contaminated items if necessary. Await local collection guidance. Do not burn contaminated debris. That last one makes me close my eyes for a second because I know someone already thought of it. Burning unknown residue can turn one hazard into an inhalation hazard and send it into neighbors' lungs. Fire is not a cleanup plan. At 7:20, a shrimp boat captain from Grand Isle calls through a satellite phone relay. He says the water around the dock has dark patches moving with the tide. He says bait fish are dead near the pilings. He says 3 men tried to leave before dawn and turned back because rainwater on deck stained rope and hands. He asks whether Gulf water is safe. I cannot answer. Nobody can. Coastal contamination is a different beast. Tides, salinity, sediment, marshes, oil infrastructure, fisheries, drinking water intakes, wildlife refuges. Once contamination enters that web, cleanup becomes negotiation with geography. The caller says, so we just sit here. I say, you keep out of the water and wait for Coast Guard or parish guidance. He says we always wait. Then the line drops. I do not know whether he was angry at me, the state, the weather, or a whole life spent being told help is coming from somewhere inland. By 8, schools that sheltered overnight begin controlled releases in safer zones. The school secretary from Lafitte calls back. Her voice is hoarse. All the children stayed inside. 2 staff members developed rashes. 1 custodian who cleared a drain is at the hospital. The boy with the gray sleeve is fine so far. She says parents are still angry because nobody gave them a perfect answer. I tell her nobody had one. She says I know, but they needed somebody to blame in the lobby. Then she asks whether I think the rain is over. I tell her the forecast shows more bans possible later. She does not speak for a while. Then she says, of course it does. That is the 2nd day beginning, not a new disaster, just the same one with daylight and consequences. The roads are streaked, the canals are wrong. The water systems are stressed. The hospitals are full of people who may get better and people who may not. The official cause is still unknown. The first laboratory charts will be argued over by people who slept and people who did not. Political offices will start shaping blame. Companies will start protecting records. Agencies will start protecting wording. Families will start making lists of damaged property, missing workers, sick relatives, dead animals, and water they do not trust. I keep broadcasting because the story is not the black rain by itself. It is what the rain touches. A school decision, a cattle trough, a plant intake, a cut on a worker's hand, a storm drain cleared by a man who wanted to help, a grocery shelf, a parish statement, a flooded road, a brother in a control room keeping pressure in lines he cannot promise are clean, a newsroom arguing over the exact point where warning becomes panic. The rain falls, then people make choices inside it. That is where the damage spreads. Full. At 8:30, Terrence asks me what we say if the next band turns north and misses us. I say we tell people it missed us. He asks what we say if it turns back. I say we tell people it turned back. He nods. That is the job stripped down to the bone. Say what is known. Say what is not. Say what changed. Say what people can do without pretending control is bigger than it is. The last thing I record in that first stretch is not a warning. It is a correction. Earlier, we reported that a shelter in Gretna had bottled water available. By 8:40, it did not. The shipment was delayed by road closures, and the remaining supply was reserved for medical needs and infants. I say the correction plainly and apologize. Some listeners will be angry. They should be. Bad information sends people into bad weather. Correcting it does not erase the harm, but leaving it wrong would do more. That is another rule for crisis reporting. Pride is a contaminant too. At 9, I step outside for the first time since morning, under the small concrete overhang by the side door. I do not step into the rain line. The air smells metallic and sour, with wet asphalt underneath. The station door is stained where the unknown handprints dried. Across the street, the abandoned leaf blower is gone, either taken by its owner or carried off by someone who still thinks property matters the same way today. A city truck moves slowly past with 2 workers inside wearing masks and face shields. Neither looks at me. The gutters run dark toward the corner drain. I think about going home. Then my phone buzzes with a new alert from the weather service. Another band forming offshore. Slow moving. Heavy rainfall possible by late morning. I go back inside and wash my hands even though I touched nothing. Terrence is already in the chair, reading the newest water advisory in that tired, steady voice people trust because it has no performance left in it. Grant sends one more text. Still inside. Still running. Parnell's hospital status is unknown. The photographer is alive. The missing public works man has not been found. The school secretary is still at the school. The cattle farmer stopped texting. The black rain is not finished. So I sit down, put the headphones back over my ears, and pull the yellow pad close. The first page is smeared from my wet sleeve where Parnell brushed past me hours earlier. The ink has bled around the words black residue, oily question mark, galvanized metal, old cuts, chlorine demand, pressure loss, second band. It is ugly, but readable. That is enough. I turn the microphone back toward me and start again with the only honest sentence left. Here is what we know right now.